So I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker this morning before we get started here. Craig Benson has been working in career services for more than 20 years and is in his 14th year at the MU Career Center. Last year, when we were trying to think of keynote speakers and generating some names, each time I would say Craig Benson, somebody would say, I've heard him, he's great, I've heard him, he's great. So we are really fortunate to have him this morning. The MU Career Center offers career services for all students at the University of Missouri, particularly assistance with career exploration, strengths development, part-time and work-study employment, resume and interview preparation, and post-graduation career planning. In his current role as the Assistant Director, Craig coordinates one of the most comprehensive paraprofessional training and supervision programs, so you may want to ask him about that, in the country, providing individual career advising to more than 7,500 people annually. Craig also coordinates one of the largest self-sustaining strengths development programs in the country, helping to deliver strengths assessments and education to more than 5,000 people per year. Craig holds degrees in business, bachelor's and MBA with management emphasis and education, and is also, I know, working on a PhD as he had a presentation last night. So we are really fortunate to have Craig here today, so if you'll please help me welcome him.
Let's pull this up. So as I work on this, I am, by the way, a K-State grad, and I work at MU, and I'm trying to be a good sport, so I wore the blue here. Actually, kind of funny thing, one of the colleagues that I work with a lot, Dr. Mary Hepner, who is a faculty member, does a lot of research in the career area, came into my office just about 2 weeks ago and says, I've got this really interesting book, Craig. And it has diversity on the front of it, and this book about kind of diversity and things. Shows me a page that has this table, and it's talking about biases. What kind of biases do we have about different people? And there's a study that was done about how acceptable is it to have a bias against different people. And on one side of the list, there are things like blind people. It's not acceptable to have a bias against blind people. That was the one that was the least acceptable bias. Most acceptable bias, according to the study, was rapists and terrorists and racists and things like that. It makes a lot of sense, right? Right in the middle, there's rednecks, and right next to rednecks is Kansas State University graduates. And I started to get curious, and I looked at the list a little bit more, and it's actually less acceptable to have a bias against people who live in the city of Lawrence, Kansas, was on the list too. It was done by a KU researcher. So anything can get published, apparently. But we're here to talk about something different, which is the theme, for your conference is Crossroads, kind of the student-employee crossroads, making that transition from being a student to being an employee. But I'm thinking even longer term than that. What does it mean to have meaningful work? And so we're going to take a little exploration down this path of what meaningful work really looks like. I think to begin with, though, you got to know a little bit more about me and what I believe. And there are 3 things that are on this, and these could each be a presentation, but we're going to talk about them very, very quickly just to keep going. Number 1, I think there's a lot of different areas in the world where we have potential to grow as a civilization, right? It's easy to say technology is one of those, that kind of globalization is one, that interdisciplinary work is another area where we're going to grow a lot. Medical, biological kind of research is being done, food, and ecological friendly business, I think, are all different areas. But I think one of the things that we don't talk a lot about is the power of the individual person. And I believe that if we were to tap into the best of each and every one of you and everybody that's at work, we would have a much better civilization, much better work, much better companies, and much happier people than we do right now. That'll come out as we go through this. I think another thing that you need to know about me is that I believe management, which is where some of my degrees are in, is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like I said, this could be an entire presentation on its own. You'll get some of this as we get through this as well. Self-fulfilling prophecy. What I mean by that is that if you expect an employee of yours to want to do good work, if you think that they want to do good work, you will create conditions that help them to do good work. If you believe that people are lazy and inherently do not want to do good work, I believe that you will create conditions that will encourage them not to do anything for you. Once again, that will come out a little bit as we keep going. The third one is, I don't believe that career services, or whatever phrase you want to use to distinguish our profession, is not about a job. It's not about helping one student find one job. It's about a person. And so I like to think about career services being person first, right? We need to focus on what is it about that person and what does their life look like. And you'll see that as we keep going through this as well. Really today, I started with the idea of meaning, and so put that into the title, and the more I looked into this, the more I got into it, I got 3 different words that I thought were kind of interconnected. We're going to play with these 3 words for a little bit. And I want you to be thinking about this in terms of your own career as well, but then we'll transition to what we can do to help students or employees of ours later on. So if you can see that, it says exercise, some motivation required, right? But I've never been chased by a dinosaur, but motivation is where I want to start this, because I think that's the holy grail, isn't it? How do we help students be motivated to graduate, to get a good job, to have a good life? How do we help employees to be motivated to do the kind of work that we want them to be doing? How does that happen? Well, I start my story 1 year before this association started. 1946, a man by the name of Harlow was doing experiments on rhesus monkeys because they're cute, right? Isn't that cute? Has 8 rhesus monkeys, and he says, you know what, I'm going to take 2 weeks, I'm going to give them some puzzles, and I'm going to see if I can motivate them to figure out how to do these puzzles, right? And at this point, motivation was thought of as if you have a biological need to do something, if you get food or you know, something inherently great for you, then that's how you're going to get motivated. So he sets it up to where he's going to give them some raisins at some point, because apparently monkeys like raisins. I didn't know that. But he's going to give them these raisins to try and motivate them to start solving the puzzles. He puts the puzzles in the cage. He says, I'm going to start this in about 2 weeks. The monkeys on their own start playing with the puzzles and figure out how to do them before he ever starts his study, before they ever get any kind of extrinsic reward. They start having fun. The joy of the task was their own reward. Interesting. So then he gets to the point where he says, well, let's start the study, and he gives them some raisins to try and solve these puzzles, right? There's those puzzles again. And they actually start making mistakes. They weren't making mistakes before. The extrinsic reward was not motivating them anymore. What's going on? Let's look at this for you. So there's a problem Daniel Pink references in his book called Drive. It's called the candle problem. And essentially, if you've ever seen him talk, he talks about, oh, let's just take half of you, and we're going to give you a problem. You guys are going to have the same problem. You're going to have different motivations here. So I'm going to give you a box of tacks. I'm going to give you a candle, and I'm going to give you something to light the candle with. What I want you to do is put the candle, attach the candle to a wall above a table in a way in which when you light the candle, no wax will fall onto the table. Catch that? So think about a table over there. Attach a candle to the wall in a way in which the wax will not drip onto the table. This half of the room, we're going to say, whoever does this the fastest, I will give you a cash prize. Actually, the top 10 finishers, I'm going to give you $25, and the number 1 finisher, I'll give you $100. Okay? Whoever finishes fastest, you get money. You guys, you don't know that they're getting money for this. Separately, we test you and we say, I'm going to give you, I'm just going to test you for norms. I want to know kind of what the norm is for how long it takes you to figure out how to do this. And people come up with different kind of ideas, right? It's, well, maybe I could melt half a candle and use the melted wax side to stick it to the, well, the wax still falls on the table. The big jump here, of course, if you haven't figured this out yet, is you take the tacks out of the box, you tack the box to the wall, you put the candle in the box, and you're done, right? In this scenario, with it given to you like this, you guys kick the crap out of them. You do this job so much faster because you're intrinsically motivated to finish this. It's a creative problem. However, if we give you the same problem when we give you the tacks out of the box, and you don't have to make the logical leap of I have to take the tacks out of the box, you guys beat them, because this is now no longer a creative problem. This is a fairly routine kind of oh, well, I have a box, I'll put the candle in the box, I'll tack it to the wall. Point is, we have started to see it, well, we're in the middle of an evolution of work, right? That we all know this. We're in a knowledge economy, and a lot of the jobs, particularly that our college graduates are getting, are very creative in nature, whether that's creative in working with people or ideas or things or processes or whatever that is. Because of that creative nature, it's more important that people are intrinsically motivated than they're getting some kind of extrinsic reward. In essence, it's not an answer about whether we're going to motivate people by providing an incentive or a punishment, a carrot or stick. That intrinsic motivation is more important. So in Drive, he says, well, in order to have intrinsic motivation, there are three things that are really important. One is providing people with autonomy, the chance to have the freedom to pick a number of different things. Maybe it's the task that you do at work. Maybe it's the team that you work with. Maybe it's the technique that you use. In some way, shape, or form, though, it's important for you, if you're at work, to have autonomy. Mastery. People want to get better at stuff, right? People want to get better at stuff, naturally. I've got a 4-year-old. Do you have young kids? I've got a 1-year-old, too. He likes to just sit on things, and he's learning how to walk. But the 4-year-old, he wants to be really good at everything, and he's not the only one in his class. Every single child in his preschool, his daycare class, they want to get really good at stuff. And I believe that we're the same way, that we all want to be really good at something. Purpose. People need to have kind of a transcendent connection to the world. And we'll get into these things a little bit later. But those are really important if we're talking about motivation. And our motivations are different. We're not all cogs in a machine. When we were doing assembly line work, I could step out of my position in the assembly line, and you could step into it, and we would continue moving. But because of the kind of creative work that we're doing, that's no longer possible. Talk about the second word in that link, mattering. If you can't read this, this is Calvin Hobbes. It says, I'm significant. In this, there's kind of some stars back there, screaming the dust speck, he says. So he's kind of contemplating that he doesn't really feel very significant in this huge, big world out there. Here's a good quote. This is not an ego thing, it's a DNA thing. Human beings were created for significance, and the most dangerous feeling they can have is the feeling that they don't matter. Wow. According to a survey done by the APA Center for Organizational Excellence, 39% of the people they surveyed, about 1,500 people, 39% of them felt like they had advancement opportunities at work. The one that really caught me on this list was 51% of them felt valued at work. I'm not going to even ask you to raise your hands. How many of you feel valued at work? 49% of people don't feel valued at work at all. And we spend, what, 2/3 of our waking hours working? That's kind of scary, isn't it? People, recognition. There's also the 47% said that their employers sought their input, but only 37% of people thought that their employers actually made changes based on the input that they had. If we feel like we should matter and we want to matter at work, but are not feeling valued, then that's the disconnect, isn't it? Mattering at work is perception that, to some degree, and in a variety of ways, our experience at work indicates to us that we're a significant part of the world around us. So what I want you to do is think for just a second. Write this down. In what ways do you feel like you matter at work? See if you can come up with a couple of different phrases or ideas there. By the way, at this point, if you are looking at your neighbor and thinking, I don't feel like I matter at work, I'm one of those 49%, there's a number of great career counselors in the room. We might need to exchange. Oh, wait, you just did. It was speed networking, right? You know them now. So anybody willing to shout out something they felt like made them feel like they mattered at work? It's a pretty big group, but yeah. Acceptance of ideas, absolutely. What else? Yeah. Isn't that true? You feel like you're important because they can contact you. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes that's annoying, but wow, if nobody ever needed you, that would feel awful, wouldn't it? Yeah. Any other ideas? Yeah. Yeah, especially in our profession, resourcefulness is very important, isn't it? Yeah.
I guess we help improve the lives of people and values within our team.
Help improve the lives of people. Absolutely. I think that there's something inherently significant about that kind of work. And I think it's okay for us to think about this, right? Sometimes we use the word significant and we think, oh, wow, that's pretty ego-driven. But like I said, the quote before said, this is not about ego. This is about us as humans. We need to feel like we matter. I'm going to layer on one extra thing, and that is this idea of transitions that our college students, as they graduate, they're going out into the world of employment. That is a major life transition, and actually all of college is just one huge transition into who I'm going to be later. It's kind of a cocoon, right? Schlossberg, who studies transitions, says that if you're looking at what triggers growth in people when they face transitions, these are some of the major things that she came up with. Belonging. And I mean, a place where, you know, I always think about Cheers, but many of you weren't alive when Cheers was running on TV and everybody, you know, knew Norm! So, mattering, agency, the idea that you can make something happen, mastery. Hey, look, there's that word again that just showed up before. People want to get better at stuff. And support from people around them. Really interesting. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at to help somebody feel like they matter. Here's your eye test. Let's look at the third word there. So we talked about motivation. We talked about mattering. Third one is meaning. And this is really what this presentation is geared toward, but I wanted to kind of set this up. The meaning of life is quite simply, don't you wish you knew the rest of that one right there? Here's an interesting, this is the very top of an infographic that's really long. It's called the Phillips Work-Life Study. But Americans crave more meaning at work, and actually most people believe that meaning at work is more important than salary. A student that graduated, used to work for me, lives in Idaho now, going to graduate school, sent me an article just from this past weekend, so November 30th. New York Times article quoted this, that Harris Interactive poll said that the #1 factor that young adults aged 21 to 31 wanted in a successful career was a sense of meaning. #1. I, of course, knew this already. That's why this is the topic that I chose. No, I had no idea. But meaning is kind of this idea of something, being a part of something bigger than yourself. It is a person's experience is something meaningful, something of value that work provides. And so I'm going to ask you to write this down as well. In what ways do you feel like your work is meaningful? A little bit different question than mattering, but in what ways do you feel like your work is meaningful? And then go ahead and turn to somebody. This is about as long as I can talk without having to do some kind of an activity, right? This has been too long for me already. So turn to somebody near you and talk about what you wrote down for meaning and mattering, if that was really interesting to you as well. So what are your thoughts so far? What is it about your job that you find meaning and mattering working? So go for it. All right, wrap up your conversation.
Administrative stuff, right? Yeah. That's very useful.
I'm hoping that this topic is at least connecting to you as a person. We'll get to how we can apply this to students and employees in a little bit, but what are some of the thoughts that came out so far? Like what provides you with meaning at work? Yeah. Making a difference in someone's life. That's a big one, yeah. Okay. Helping them explore their options. Good. Absolutely. I love that word, validated, and that you're important to me. That's a great way to phrase it. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Guiding managers on how to identify talent. Absolutely. That's actually one of my favorite parts of my job. I manage a group of about 40 students that provide most of our career services, and I don't meet with individual students myself except for those 40. So helping to figure out who they are and how to move forward, that's best parts of my job. So, you know, I was thinking about this a lot. Thanksgiving holiday, I'm sitting at the dinner table with 3 college students in my extended family. All 3 of them kind of at this transition crossroads. One's working at a community college, working full-time, going to school on the side. One just graduated and is trying to figure out what to do next. One has got a year left, and all 3 of them talking about things. And, you know, I'm there, and, you know, college student, I'm perking up as they start talking about things. And one of the things that bothered me, unfortunately, was the language that they were using. It was things like, oh, I never took biology because it was just too hard. Another one said, I have to go into work tomorrow, Black Friday. She worked at Macy's. And she said, I hope nobody asks me for advice on what to wear because helping people find clothes that fit them is hard. All 3 of them, they just, the continued part of their discussion was, there's just things in life that are hard. And I found myself wondering, well, what is it that you're going to want to do? What is it that's going to get you excited enough to want to try the hard stuff? What is it that's going to provide you with meaning in life, right? Of course, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about this presentation. At the same time, I work around college students all the time, and particularly the ones that I employ. Those are the ones that I have most contact with, and those are students that are willing to, some of them were working over break because they're so invested in what they're doing. Some of them are excited about life and the prospects that are coming up, and they find meaning in every single moment that they have in college. What makes the difference there? And it really started to get me thinking. You know, one of my best models of meaning in my life has been my dad. My dad is a faculty member at Kansas State University, and he is a fantastic teacher. He's won just about every teaching award that he can. He does a lot of great advising. He's very involved in clubs and organizations, diversity efforts on campus. He's just very invested in what he does, and he figured out at a pretty young age. He started out as a chemistry major, and is now a Spanish faculty member. Right? Chemistry was not it for him. He figured out that something different was there, and he actually grew up in a place called Taos, New Mexico. Taos now is well known as a very artsy place, very well known for its ski valley. When he was there was no ski valley until he was late in high school. There was no ski school. They didn't have any slopes. He lived there when there were only about 400 people, and about 100 of the 400 were white. Most of them were Native American or Hispanic. So he grew up in a culture that was very much not like what I grew up in Manhattan, Kansas. Very interesting to think about that. Part of his meaning at work was connecting back to this childhood culture that he grew up in, and helping Latinos especially to make life the most that they could, to help other people understand Hispanic culture, Latino culture. He plays guitar. He's trying to do this from every angle possible. And he loves his job so much that he actually was offered, faculty member. He's got a lot of autonomy in his work. He can get involved in different things. There's all sorts of great stuff going on. He has been offered many jobs at many different universities, but he connected really well with the people who were in the department that he was in. He liked the fact that there was not a lot of politicking going on. And he was offered the position of being a number of different things, but especially department chair several times. Never wanted it. Never wanted it because he was in his sweet spot, if you will. He really found a lot of meaning in what was going on. I learned that you could love your job, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I think that sets a stage for us talking real quickly about what are some different ways in which people find meaning. And this is according to a Harvard Business Review article that came out December a year ago. But here are 4 different things that they kind of compiled together. And these are 4 big chunks, compile a lot of different things, of sources of meaning that people find at work. Number 1, purpose. I work side by side with my office, like next to my office, woman who runs our Jumpstart program, which if you want to know why it's in our Career Center, I can tell you about that later. But Jumpstart is a national AmeriCorps program that is aimed at getting college students into schools, particularly early childhood education, getting college students into child care to connect with small groups of students that come from a disadvantaged background. So you talk about purpose. Think about a college student going and meeting one-on-one with a young child who doesn't have any books at home, who doesn't have the resources to have maybe even food all day long. But they've got a college student who's willing to play with them, help them interact, help them learn how to develop social skills throughout an entire year. That to me is like, oh yeah, there's some purpose there. Contributions beyond yourself. And the key to this one was experiencing, people who had to experience work making positive contributions to others in order to feel like they had purpose. This isn't the only source of meaning, though. This is what a lot of times we jump to and think about. They also talked about self-realization, and I don't know if I like that word for this, but the 3 things that were in this clump were kind of learning and growth and accomplishment. Meaning. You know what? I like learning new stuff. Fun for me to do some research for this presentation. It was fun for me to, I'm a PhD class. I collect degrees, apparently. Learning and growth. But at your job, do you have a chance to learn something new, to develop, to, have a mentor? Important. Sense of accomplishment. Did you get something done? And did you do it well? Are you well known as somebody who has an expertise in an area? So self-realization was an area that they talked about. Prestige, and I'm not going to talk about this in a whole lot, but there are people who, this one doesn't connect to me personally, but it doesn't mean it's a bad one, that they find a lot of meaning in having prestige at work, being able to tell somebody else what they do, being able to make a significant contribution to something and have it be big, right? Or power. And power, a lot of times we use, and we talk about that as a bad word, but power can be a really good word. Some people really get a lot of meaning out of having power to make big change. And big change doesn't mean bad change. Big change can mean really good things as well. And last but not least, there's a social component to meaning as well. Belonging to a community. Having personal agency, once again, the belief that you can make a difference, kind of a self-efficacy. Mattering, there's that word again, real involvement, that someone that listens to your ideas and your opinions count. And then autonomy, the freedom to do what you believe is going to be meaningful is also very important. We inherently want that kind of autonomy, and we talked about that earlier. Well, what does that remind you of that we've already talked about? If I change the word learning and growth to mastery, that's intrinsic motivation right there. That was what I talked about from Daniel Pink's Drive book. That's mattering. That's why I said I started out down this path of talking about meaning, and I really believe that meaning, mattering, and motivation are connected. So if we want to get people motivated, we have to help them find more meaning in their work. I think that that's one of the pieces that we're going to be exploring here. How do we do that? Because I don't think that starts in the workplace. I think that starts a long time before that. One other piece that I want to talk about before I get there, this is a fun a person who's doing consulting called The Human Workplace. This is a little on the, I don't know, birth and death kind of angle can be a little negative. But I think it's an interesting way to put this. Students have some responsibility in this process as well, and I'm not saying they don't. I'm going to talk about what we can do because I think that that's what we can make a change in. But you know, this idea of you're in charge of this section of your life right here, what are you going to do with it, is really interesting. There's the couple of quotes. One question that I had somebody ask me is, what out of all of this, meaning life, will be worth it for you? Wow. Ever think about asking a student that? What out of all of this will be worth it for you? Or what will make yours a life worth living? There's those kind of questions that we could be asking. But in the end, students are responsible for making their own meaning in life. I'm not saying that we're the ones who have to do that. They are the only ones who can do that. But we can help them along the way, right? We can help them along the way. Here we get to that idea of crossroads. So students, like I said before, in transition, definitely a crossroads for them, but we're also at a crossroads for us. How are we as career services professionals or as employers going to treat the students and employees that we work with? What are we going to do to help them have more meaning so that they are mattering more and so that they have more motivation to do the kinds of things that they need to be doing? Not just about them being happy, it's about them being productive as well. And not just for your company or organization, for your community and for their life to feel like it's worthwhile. So I compiled a list of some of the things that were on some of those previous slides, and this is my short list. What are our targets? What are we going to go after? Autonomy, mastery, purpose, that comes from intrinsic motivation, the idea of significance, belonging, involvement, real involvement, having somebody listen to your ideas, the idea of personal agency, and support. Well, if those are the kind of targets that we have to help somebody find meaning at work, maybe there's some things that we can do to help them get there. And so what I want to do is turn it over to you guys. Once again, take a shot at writing down what is something that you could do or that you currently do that you think accomplishes something on this list. It's a pretty vague statement, but maybe one of these words is really intriguing you right now, right? How do we provide people with more autonomy? I don't know. Let me think about it for a minute. What is something that you're doing or that you could be doing that addresses something on this list? Write some things down. I'll have you share it with some others at your table in just a minute, and we'll get into some of my recommendations. And this could be for career services people, things that you're helping students to develop so that they will have more of this later on in life. For employers, this might be something you're doing in your own workplace. I'm going to actually switch this up. I'm going to show you some of my recommendations. We'll get back to what are some other things that you have in a minute, make sure that we have enough time for questions at the end. My number one thing, this is kind of introing into the next set of recommendations that I have. I've got 6 different things that I think we could be doing. But I want to talk about loving your job. I have a friend, Shane Lopez, was a faculty member at KU, works at Gallup now, lives in Lawrence still. he was having an interview with Mark Savickas, who, if you know Dr. Savickas, he's big into career construction and also does some work in meaning and things like this. And he got intrigued by this conversation and ends up writing this quote in an article that, or in a statement that Shane wrote. So he said, you won't get much professional development anymore. You won't be on a team that stays together 2 or 3 years anymore. You won't spend your career in one place. So I started wondering, what if you love your job? Can you buck the trend in the modern workplace and have a job that will love you back? This all stemmed from a quote that Savickas said that work won't love you back anymore. Isn't that interesting? Can you get your work to love you back? And what he's talking about is, he says, it's not about people choosing a job they love anymore. It's about people making jobs that they love. That people design and build their own jobs over time. They think it's up to them. The people, and this is according to some research he's doing right now about people who really love their job, they believe that it's up to them to make those changes, to turn their own job into something that they love, to surround themselves with people who care about them and encourage them. And he says, you don't start a dream job, you make one. And in this process, he's also encouraging people to find a caring environment to go work in and to do what he calls boss shaping, which I think is an interesting way to somewhat adjust your job as you go along by working with your boss. But he's pointing at this idea of job crafting. And so that's my number one recommendation. If you haven't looked into anything about job crafting, this is some really interesting stuff. And this is a really quick overview of what job crafting is. The process, employees redefining and imagining the job designs in personally meaningful ways. Job design is basically just kind of the job that was given to you, right? You start to reshape the way that you work. How many of you are actually doing the exact same set of tasks, have the exact same relationships that you did the day that you started your job? Probably not very many of you. You've all done something different, right? Job crafting, according to the authors of this, they are, this is once again a real quick boiling down of this, but what might you craft? And particularly for employers, this would be the section you look at. You might craft the tasks that you are doing in your work. You might take on new tasks. You might emphasize different things that you're doing, or you might redefine the tasks that you're doing in your work. The second thing that you might shape in this process would be relationships. We all add new relationships on. We emphasize different relationships that are going on. We adapt relationships to fit new needs that we have. So relationships is another big piece of something that we can change. And then cognitive perceptions, really it's more about the perceptions shaping that is here. How do I reframe the way that I do my work? How do I rethink it? Do I expand my thinking about who I'm helping? Do I focus my thinking about the way that I do my job? Or do I make some new connections with that? So redefining, reshaping. You know, one of the things that I've been involved with is a leadership conference that we do over the summer, and it actually has pulls from about 5 different universities in the country, bring undergraduates together into a camp, and we do a really experiential kind of a leadership camp. So you do things like canoe down a stream, and you talk about what was communication like between you and your partner. If you've ever tried canoeing, it's not as easy as you think. And particularly for those people who think that they know how to canoe, it's not as easy as they think. The person in the back is the one who steers the canoe. If you've never done that before and you try it, it's very interesting. Well, I started doing this conference, and it was something that I felt passionate about, and I was the one in charge. And after a while, it started to get to a point where I needed some help. So I brought more people on, and I had to reframe the way that I thought about that work. Instead of me being the one to lead them all the time, my job was now to take care of the staff that I had that was leading the students through these activities, right? Reframing, reshaping, rethinking. In order to job craft, individuals need to have a good understanding of at least these 3 different things. These are what the authors are pointing at. The motives, strengths, and passions. Passions is a big word. The students that work for me love the idea of passions. I don't know that everybody has a passion that they can fulfill at work, but man, it's a great idea to think about what are the things you're passionate about. One of my former employees, actually the very first student that I ever hired at the University of Missouri, went off. She went to go teach in the inner city of New York, started working with children with autism and special needs, found that work to be interesting, but wasn't quite fulfilled, went to work for an agency that she started to go and work with individual students instead of teaching in a classroom. And 3 months after that, that company folded. What do you do? Well, she had the personal agency to actually say, I'm going to start my own company, and she took the clients that were there. She started her own business and now works as a specialist in working with children with autism. And her passion, not only children with autism, but it's games. So the way that she works with them is she finds games and figure out ways to sit down with a student and play a game with them and ask them questions about it along the way. So passion doesn't have to be exactly what you're doing, but it could be something else that you're bringing in. Strengths, if we had all the time in the world, I could talk about strengths for days and days and days. But very recent thing from Gallup, people who focus on their strengths are more than 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life. That's probably one of the most compelling ways that I could say that. Strength. Focus on what's right with people, what energizes people, and if we help our students understand what's energizing and motivating for them, what motives they have, that might help them to be able to job craft in the future. So I think we already got that. Well, let's break those down. Just real quickly, some other things we can do. We can help students understand themselves, or employees. And that might be by inquiry, by asking good questions. That's one of the things that I'm really on a quest to do, is to find the best questions to be asking in different scenarios. If you haven't had a chance to look at appreciative inquiry, fascinating stuff, great way to think about pulling a student into the future, thinking about themselves. But it could also be about, for employers, it could be asking them questions about what's energizing for them at work, or what their opinions are. So any kind of understanding about that individual person, I think, is another way to help people develop meaning. This is what we do, right? This is no duh stuff. Here's another one that, if you haven't looked at the career style interview, Mark Civicus puts this out. 7 questions that he asks. Some of them are a little quirky. I highlighted the first one. What did you admire? Who did you admire when you were growing up? Okay, you can think about somebody. Optimus Prime. I watched Transformers when I was growing up, so I admired Optimus Prime. Well, really, the meaning in that question is why I admired Optimus Prime. He was a leader. He was not real quick to get agitated. He was very calm. He was a robot. That wasn't the thing that really connected to me, but it was this idea of quiet calmness. But when he really needed to, he could go in and clean up stuff and make everything right. I really admired that, and that's something that I am trying to do in my work now. Who did you admire when you were growing up? Was it your parent, or your sibling, or a national figure, or a celebrity, or somebody? The reason that you admired them was the meaning that you attached to that person, and it's probably something that you're trying to achieve in your own life. Well, that's a fascinating question. The rest of these questions all get at all sorts of other things. You can look it up if you want to. I'm going to keep moving on so that we can get to some mastery. And if I like Transformers, of course I like Star Wars as well, right? Geek growing up, but they keep calm. I can't even say that. Calm you shall keep, and carry on you must. Yes. Yoda over there. If I think of a master, Yoda is the one that comes to mind. But how do we help people master things, learn, grow? Well, we can offer new classes and teach them. We can offer them professional development and all sorts of things that we already know. Mentor is probably one of the most important words on that slide. Making sure that every student that we have, every employee that we have, has a true mentor in their life, that somebody is guiding them along the way. Once again, this is stuff that we're already doing, but our focus on this might help us to get to meaning. I had an interesting experience right here in Kansas City several years ago. I came in to do a session with one of the larger companies here. A gentleman who worked in a unit in the tech industry said, on average, young people come in and they leave about 2 to 3 years after they start, right? That's the tech industry. So I want to use all the resources of my company to help make sure that those individual employees can reach their career goals after they leave our company? Come in and do a career development workshop for them. How can they take advantage of our resources? And I said, you want me to do what? You want me to help you get rid of your employees? And he said, no, I want you to help me to show them what kind of resources we have as a company that might help them down the road, because I just know that they won't be working for me forever. That's just not the way that the world works anymore. And I thought about it, and I put together a presentation, and I went. And that day, I went up and talked to him right beforehand. I said, how many people have turned over in your group in the last 10 years? How many people have left? And he said, well, we're actually up to 25 now. We started with 4. Only like 2 or 3 have left in the last 10 years. What was he doing? Helping them develop mastery. He's giving them options and opportunities as well. But I think we should think about helping students evaluate job offers in a new way too. There's this idea that, yes, there's a shortage of jobs. If you find a great job, you should take it. But what does a great job look like for a student? What does a great job look like for any one of us? And how do you really evaluate that? Is it about the salary that you're going to make? There's the benefits package. That's a really important part of the offer as well. What other kind of perks can you negotiate? That's a great part of the offer. But what about asking some questions like, what opportunities will I have to learn and grow? Isn't that important? Or how do you support your employees' well-being? How do you help somebody understand the broader context, getting into a position where they have a caring environment where they can develop the kind of meaning that we're talking about? Realistic previews, employers also being upfront about what is it that you offer, what are the kinds of things that you bring. One of the things I've found in my research is that engagement of employees is a really big topic right now. Engagement of employees does not depend on having a workplace like Google. Google with their 14 or whatever different free restaurants that people can do. You can bring your dog to work. You can do your laundry there. They have all sorts of perks, one of the best workplaces you can imagine, but that's not what's important. What's important is that employees feel like they matter and that they have meaning in their work, that they're engaged. So how do we shape that? You may not have access to all those big things. What are the ways that we can connect to those? This one's more specifically geared to the employers in the room, but I think this is interesting for all of us. How do we help students connect to their purpose? A lot of times the mantra that we get inside of organizations is about the company. We want to do something because it makes the company do well, because the company needs you to do this, because we're up against a wall and the company really needs your help to get through this next part. But some people identify with that. Other people identify more with, what is the societal contribution that we're making? What is the impact of what we're doing on the bigger audience? What is the impact that we're doing on customers or the work team or on me, the individual? This is based on an article by McKinsey and Company. They said if we speak to all of those stories at once, we might be getting more people than just focusing on what our individual company is. From a career services perspective, this is an interesting thing to think about. How do we help students identify what's going to bring them purpose and meaning in life later on? Once again, those conversations. Then I'm going to kind of leave with this last one, which is a supportive, autonomous environment. One of the things I like to talk about is I think we should be doing more work to help people be like a compass and not like a GPS. How many of you have a GPS device that you use, phone, anything like that? You ever go somewhere and get there? Number one, that was a question, right? Did you ever get there because of the GPS? But you get there and then you think, how did I get here? And try and drive back out of there without using your GPS device. You can't do it, can you? It's like, whoa. GPS device is wonderful, but it depends on a couple of things. One is that you know where you are, and the other one is that you know where you're going. And the third one is that you follow instructions explicitly and that those instructions are correct, right? Because otherwise we get recalculating. Compass is a very different device. Any of you ever actually used a compass to find where you're going? Yeah. It's kind of like, I'm going to go that way. All right. What do you get along the way? Well, you start looking at things. You start identifying what's out there. You start figuring out what other opportunities are there. You have the freedom to choose how you get from here to there, And you get to do it in your own way. Are we providing people with explicit instructions on how to lead their life, or are we giving them a compass and saying, go figure it out? Let's go move forward. In the work world, this is called managing outcomes and not processes. You focus on what you want out of it and not how you're going to get there. This is really what the entire, once again, having a 4-year-old, this is what the entire Cars movie is about, right? He gets lost, and he has to find his way back, and he has this kind of wonderful experience with his friends in Radiator Springs because he wasn't supposed to be there ever before. What are those wonderful experiences that we're missing, those self-actualizing moments that we're missing because we're listening to somebody else tell us how to get where we need to be? So in the end, anybody remember this movie? City Slickers? Wonderful scene in this movie where you have Jack Palance on the left, you got Billy Crystal on the right. Jack Palance named Curly. He's a rancher. He drives cattle for a living. Mitch on the right, Billy Crystal's character, Mitch, having a midlife crisis, about to lose his wife. He decides to go with some of his friends, and they're going to go transport cattle. They're going to go move cattle, right? This is called a vacation for him. And he says, Curly says, you know what the secret of life is? And Mitch says, no, what? And Curly says, this. And Mitch says, a finger? And Curly says, no. One thing, just one thing. You stick to that, and everything else doesn't mean anything. He says a different word there, but I said anything. Mitch says, that's great, but what's the one thing? And Curly says, that's what you've got to figure out. So what is the one thing that you should remember out of all this? What is one way to wrap all this up? I don't know that I have that because I've got a lot of ideas, but I do have Gallup's version of their one thing, which they have called their Bill of Rights. And this is something that they've proposed for students, but they say actually everybody, not just every student, but everybody should have. Number one, someone who cares about their development. Number two, they should have the opportunity to do what they do best every day, like what they have, to do what they like every day. And number three, to do what they do best every day. And if you think about that, those are three things that kind of encompass a lot of what we've been talking about. If every single person, every student, every employee that we have has an opportunity to have that in their life, wouldn't we all have more meaning? We would matter more. We would have more motivation to continue working forward. So thank you very much. There's another quote there if you want that one. But, we got a few minutes for questions, comments, feedback, thoughts that you had on ideas that we could be doing with students to help them, students or employees to help them find more meaning that we didn't get to. Yeah. Yeah. This one? Yep. Absolutely. This is how I get excited, right? I learn lots of different things and try and put them together. Any questions, thoughts? Yeah.
That's a big challenge for us.
Yes. I'm going to talk about the barrier, but I'm going to talk about it in the way of talking about the opportunity. And I think one of the barriers is lack of experience. And so the opportunity is having a variety of different experiences, whether that's, you have all these programs on your campuses and your organizations. You got, the study abroad. We've got undergraduate research. You can get into a part-time job or an internship or volunteer or do whatever. But to me, the secret to all of this is helping people get into unique experiences that they can then reflect on, that they can move forward with. I think one of the barriers to getting into that is that attitude of it's too hard, or I don't know where to start, because there's too many options out there. So one of the things we can do is help simplify What are some great starting places for you? How can you get into something? For some people, their academic program is going to do that for them. For a lot of people, it's not. So kind of wrapping the barrier and the opportunity, I think, together there. Good question, though. Yeah. Three favorite questions. One of the ones that I think his name is Dan Schott, so talks a lot about appreciative inquiry and career services. He uses a couple different questions that he really likes. One is, if you had 3 wishes about your career future, what would they be? I think that's an interesting question. Not very easy, but 3 wishes. Number 2, one that I really like that he put together too was, if you were to be 10 times more bold, what would you do? Yeah, if you were 10 times more bold, what would you do? 3 questions. And I really like those set of questions that were from the career style interview, the one about who's somebody that you admired, what did you admire about them, and kind of exploring that with somebody. Another one that was on that interview that I think is interesting is, what is your favorite quote or saying? And Civicus talks about that being kind of the title of your life story. So one of the quotes that I like is "Be the change that you wish to see in the world" by Gandhi. Well, it's interesting if I turn that back and I say, what if that is my life title? Wow. Have I been working to create change in my own world? And yes, I have. Not the kind of change that Gandhi did, but you know, that's part of what I'm trying to get to, is a world where we think about employment as not being a bad thing. Work isn't a 4-letter word, that work is actually a good piece of your life, that it's empowering, and I think that we're all going to be better off if we get to that. So I think that's a good question too. But, yep. Yes.
Do you use some kind of success?
Mm-hmm.
There's a percentage between today that
And that percentage is what, 98%, something like that? And that's that GPS versus, and I didn't get into this real in depth, but that's that GPS versus compass model that we can very easily fall into the trap of, I'm going to provide you with what you want, and is that what's best for them down the road? The assessments, I believe wholly in assessments. I think that they can help you start a conversation to get into that. The ones that we use in our Career Center, we use the self-directed search. You know, John Holland is still very relevant. The organization of work and talking about that is very relevant. The idea of person, environment, fit, and finding one occupation isn't as relevant anymore, but having the conversation of maybe that world, the 6 different areas in the hexagon are more of the compass directions that you're going in your life. I think that's a little bit of a different shift of how we're using that. But self-directed search, we use that one particularly because we have student employees administering it, so we don't use the strong. The Strengths Quest is one that we use. If you're interested in Strengths Quest is a fantastic instrument. There is a cost associated with it. There's other ways to get into that same kind of strengths development work. You can look at dependable strengths. You can look at appreciative inquiry. You can look at VIA, which is VIA is a free survey on character strengths. So there's different ways to get into strengths kinds of things. The third one that we use is the Missouri Occupational Card Sort. So physically moving cards into a like, dislike, or indifferent. And we're about to pick up another assessment that we're going to be using out of the state of Missouri. So those are ones that I would say, you know, there's a gentleman in the Kansas City area here who developed a thing called the Insight Inventory, part of the Insight Inventory Institute. He's a Mizzou grad, and he does some really great work. The Insight Inventory is similar to a Myers-Briggs, but is more rigorous in terms of its psychometric properties. Fantastic instrument. But any of those instruments, I think it's more about the getting to a conversation. Even, I don't know if you've looked at WooFound has a Compass out now. It's a picture-based assessment that it takes like 5 or 10 minutes. And you look at things that are like you or not like you. But any of those, I think it's more about getting that student starting to talk and having the right questions than it is about having a perfect assessment for that situation. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and that's why I'm going to go back this way. That's why I really like his set of questions, and I highlighted one of them, but some of the things on here are what TV shows do you watch? What magazines do you read? What books do you read? I can talk about that. I mean, it's a really sneaky way to get them to start talking about what are your interests. Why are you reading those magazines? What is it about those that really connects to you? What is it that you're aspiring to do is somewhere in there, but it's not overt. What do you do with your free time? I can answer that question because it's not me asking you, what do you want to do with your life? So some of those right questions, I think, is a big part of it. Yeah. I think we're just about out of time, right? All right, or a little bit over. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it.